Hello, my name is PokeJG and welcome to my first ever Pokemon Hardcore Nuzlocke challenge. This is something I've always wanted to try because as a Pokemon nerd, who doesn't want to make their favourite nostalgic childhood games feel like hell on earth? In today's video I will be taking on Pokemon Y because after watching the Legend ZA trailer, well, I got way too excited over Mega Pokemon making a return as I spent so many hours on Pokemon Y doing online battles with all the different Megas. So without further ado, let's talk about the rules for this Nuzlocke. The rules are as followed. I can only catch one Pokemon per route. I can only Mega Evolve a Pokemon once. If that Mega Pokemon dies, I can never Mega Evolve again. I cannot heal during battles. I can only use each Pokemon Center once. And I can never overlevel the Gym Leader's Ace Pokemon. After being rudely woken by a fletchling, it was time to begin our journey and time for the biggest choice in any Pokemon game, choosing a starter Pokemon. I decided for this run to go with Graham the Froakie as Greninja is just too good to pass up on. So naturally then, we had to face our rival. Our rival's Fennekin went down with 2 quick bubbles, and with that not only was this our first victory, but it's our first chance to get a wild encounter in this Nuzlocke. Our first encounter for this Nuzlocke was a Bunnelby. One Pokeball later and this cute bunny was going to join our team and I decided to name her Bert. Yes, Bert is a girl's name, that's what I've decided. On to our second encounter now in Sataloon Forest, where I encountered a Weedle. But more importantly, this is our first wild Pokemon that is a choice for being Mega Evolved. We added this spicy looking dango to the team and I named him Brian. A quick trip through the forest led me to Route 3 for another encounter and it was sadly Bunnelby again. So I went again and this time encountered a Pidgey. Pidgey is a massive encounter this early on as the first gym is a bug type, so having a flying type is a huge help. One quick catch later and Penelope was ready to join the team. The XP from catching Penelope was enough to evolve our dear friend Brian just before taking on the Sataloon gym. I made my way through Route 3 into the gym and I was ready to take on the first trainer, which I was expecting to be a piece of cake. However, the first trainer in the gym left me sweating a bit as his Ladybuzz Comet Punch hit 5 times and left poor Penelope confused and with 4 HP. But she managed to trooper through the confusion, got her attack off and ended the first trainer battle. The next 2 trainers were easy enough for Penelope to take care of with Gust. And I even got Graham involved to finish off the last trainer. But now it was time to face the gym leader, Viola. She started out with Surskit, a bug water type, making Penelope the perfect matchup for this fight. She attacked with Bubble but didn't leave a dent in our fearless feathered friend, and after a couple of gusts from Penelope, the gym leader saw her first Pokemon unable to fight. It was now time for the ace Pokemon Vivillon, who decided to make life harder by using Harden. However, Gust was still doing a fair amount of damage at this point, so I just kept plugging away with Gust and eventually, after a few tackles, Penelope held on with 6 HP to get the job done and earn me my first gym badge of this Nuzlocke. Good job, Penelope. After my bout with Viola, we saw the professor who offered me the Kanto starters and of course I took Colin the Charmander. We also evolved Brian into a Beedrill. And we also found someone's mother asleep on a bridge. Don't know how she got there. After getting jumped from a bush, we had our next encounter. A Venipede, who I decided to name Steven because he just looks like a Steven. I then got completely disrespected by our Forfrau. I then had 3 Pokemon evolve. We had Graham the Froakie evolve into a Frogadier. Colin the Charmander evolved into a Charmeleon. And last but by no means least, Penelope the Pidgey evolved into a Pidgeotto. I headed through Zubat Tunnel onto Route 10 to encounter a Spoink. I named him Bacon, which looking back seems slightly mean. I'd finally made it to Amberette Town ready to take on the gym, but immediately got sent on a side quest to ride a Rhydon and to find our next encounter. A Heloptile, who I decided to name Henry. I then went into the cave in order to save an archaeologist from the clutches of Team Flare, who were just simply no match for Graham. For Graham's hard work, we were gifted a fossil, to which I chose the Jaw fossil in order to get a Tyrant. It was here things took a sour turn. Whilst fighting a random trainer, Psyduck decided he was Super Saiyan and one-tapped Henry. I switched into Brian, who took a big hit before he decided enough was enough. He was done, hurting himself in his own confusion, giving us our first 2 deaths of this Nuzlocke, whilst I look at this evil Psyduck. I said my final goodbyes to Brian and Henry before replacing them with Bert and Brett. Then decided it was time to finally take on the second gym, and I'd imagine this gym to be easy, as Graham has Water Pulse. However, Brett got slept in both senses of the word by a trainer's Relicanth inside the gym, giving me yet another gap to fill in this team as Brett was dead. As predicted though, the rest of this gym was fairly straightforward, with a combination of my Tyrant and Greninja just water pulsing and killing everything. It was time to take on the gym leader. He led with Amora, which was fine except for the fact I didn't realise I only had 2 water pulses left, which Amora took both of to die, which means we had a big dilemma. Let me explain why. The gym leader's Ace Tyrant knows Rock Tomb, which for my team is very bad news. So my plan here is to use Bubble with Frogadier, give the gods a sacrificial pig with Bacon, and pray for a miracle. And a miracle is kind of what I got. I used Bubble with Graham as I had stated in the plan, and he firmed the Rock Tomb. I then released the sacrificial pig, and he did die, but the gods loved it. I brought out my Tyrant for some chip damage with Bite, and risked the switch into Penelope. The gods shined down on Penelope, allowing her to not get off 1 but 2 sand attacks, lowering Tyrant's accuracy, meaning I could switch into Colin for a Dragon Rage to finish the job and secure the second gym badge. Thank you, Bacon, your sacrifice will be remembered. Our next encounter was an absolutely huge one. We found a Gollet. The reason this is massive is because the Gollet is ground ghost typing, meaning it cannot be affected by either fighting or electric attacks. To add to this, the 3rd and 5th gym just so happen to be fighting and electric, so Goop is going to become an absolute hero in this run. I then got jump scared from behind a rock by Team Flare, who went down very dramatically, before making it through Geosenge Town into Reflection Cave for our next encounter, a Sableye, who I named Stew. With Stew in the box, Stephen evolved into a Whirlipede, and we moved into the Tower of Mastery to battle our rival for a Mega Bracelet. which ended up being pretty straightforward. I then had to take on the third gym leader, Karina, who didn't have much of an answer for Goop. Her main Foo fell to 2 magnitudes and did not have any attacks that would affect Goop. Machoke was much the same, he had no attacks that could affect Goop, so he fell to 3 magnitudes. And her ace Pokemon, Hawlucha, could literally only use Home Claws, so I Shadow Punched my way through it. Defeating leader Karina and earning me that all-important 3rd gym badge. I then had to take on leader Karina again, but this time the stakes were higher. She saw her beloved Lucario switch sides as he'd rather fight alongside Poke JG. And we saw our first Mega Evolved Pokemon of this series. Mega Lucario, who after taking down Karina's other Lucario, decided he wanted to join my team. I named him Lazar and decided he will be the Mega Pokemon I take forwards for this Nuzlocke. I then headed on to Route 12 for another encounter, which this time was a Pachirisu, which would have been a great encounter if I didn't kill it. But rodent deaths aside, it was now time to take on the 4th gym, which was going to provide Colin a chance to shine. After defeating a trainer in the gym, Stephen evolved into a Scolipede. And then he very nearly died straight after from a psychic attack, leaving him on 9 HP. So I let Graham finish that job. Now it was time for leader Ramos, who led for the jump bluff. His acrobatics did good damage to Colin, but returning Fighter Fang did a little bit more. Colin barely hung on after the second acrobats with 10 HP, but finished the job with 1 more Fire Fang. Up next was Ramos' ace Go-Go, who I brought Stephen out because of his poison attacks are super effective. We got off a Venoshock for some damage, but after foaming a takedown, Stephen's poison point activated, dooming the poor Billy Goat. 1 more Venoshock, and it was a goat stew for Stephen's tea. I swapped into Lazar, who delivered 2 swift punches to Victory Bell's face, leaving him knocked out. And giving us the win over Ramos, earning me my 4th gym badge. I healed up and moved on to Route 13, where I encountered a Trapinch, which I killed again. I then had another standoff with Team Flare, whose dramatics never fail to impress me, but watching those dramatics was enough to turn my beloved Graham into a Greninja. I then had to take on the Team Flare Alphas, who were equally, if not more dramatic in defeat than the Grunts. And it would seem my Pokemon love a good show, because that was enough to make Colin evolved after such a spectacle. It was now time to take on the 5th gym in Lemoise City. I had to figure out what these 3 mystery Pokemon were, as tough as that may have been, before facing the gym leader Clement. He led with his Emolga, but Volt switched out immediately after sizing up Tyrant. He switched into Magneton, who took a crit hit crunch from Tyrant before deciding to switch into Colin, who took on the oncoming Mirror Shot with ease, and 1 Fire Blast later, Magneton was no more. I switched back to Tyrant to face Clement's ace Heliolisk, as he could easily take a hit from a Thunder attack. As predicted, Tyrant firmed the Thunderbolt and did some good damage with a crunch. Knowing he would Thunderbolt again, I switched into Goop as he's unaffected by electric moves, before switching again into Steven as this Heliolisk knows Grass Knot, which Goop would have not enjoyed. Steven laughed at the Grass Knot and activated Poison Point, which made this fight a lot easier for Steven as he took a Thunderbolt on the chin and finished the job with a Venoshock. Clement then brought back the Emogul that he started with, and I brought back out Goop to finish the job. He took a heavy hit from an aerial ace and got paralysed after attacking with Shadow Punch, but he took the second aerial ace and ended the battle with just 1 more Shadow Punch, earning me my 5th gym badge. I headed out of the city onto Route 14, where I encountered a Quagsire. At this point I realised my luck just isn't there, as after breaking out of the Pokeball, this Quagsire died to poison, so I lost yet another encounter. But it's a very quick turnaround as I headed straight into the next gym, where after beating the first trainer, Tyrant evolved into a Tyrantrum. Now it was time to take on leader Valerie and her fairy type Pokemon. She led with a Mawile, and I forgot to change my team around, so I swapped out Steven for Colin, who did 1 Fire Blast, which took down the Mawile. Next up was Mr. Mime, who managed to set up a Reflect, but still took big damage from Goop's Shadow Punch. Mr. Mime then used Psychic, which saw Goop take a massive hit, but he finished the job with another Shadow Punch. Last on the list was Valerie's Sylveon, which was trickier than I thought. I used Fire Fang to try and do some damage and to get a flinch, but it simply didn't work. On the next turn, Colin hit a crit, which left Sylveon on half HP, but left me in a predicament. I didn't want her to heal, so I used Wing Attack to try and do as little damage as possible so I could finish it with a Fire Burst. 2 Wing Attacks later, I managed to use Fire Burst and finish the job, giving me the 6th gym badge. I then headed to the Pokeball factory where the Team Flare had taken over, and a few more dramatic scenes later, I saved the owner from Team Flare and received the Master Ball. On to Route 15 where I encountered a Skorupi, and this time I didn't kill it. I caught it and I named her Susie, and she went into the box. I made it to the most pointless town in the game, Dendemil Town, into an ice cave to encounter a Jinx. That ice type would have been great for the dragon typed Elite 4 member, but I killed it again. One more dramatic montage later and Goop decided it was his turn to evolve into a Gorlok. My team really do love drama. On to Route 17 where I got to ride on a Mamoswine and I'd finally made it to Anastar City to face the 7th gym leader. And after skillfully avoiding all the trainers, it was time to take on Leader Olympia. Olympia started off with a Siglif who set up with a Reflect. Goop returned a Shadow Punch for damage before surviving a crit hit Psychic and finishing off the Siglif with another Shadow Punch. Next up was Meowstic, so I switched into Graham, who took a Fake Out and that made him flinch. He then hit a Surf for over half of Meowstic's HP, and firmed a Shadow Ball without taking too much damage. Before ending it with a second Surf, just leaving Olympia's ace, Slowking. I swapped into Lazza and used Bone Rush, which hit 2 times for not a lot of damage, before taking a Yawn and Lazza became sleepy. Lazza got off an Aura Sphere before Slowking had put him to sleep. I swapped back into Graham to try and use Lick and get Slowking paralysed, and it worked. Slowking used Power Gem but it didn't do too much damage. Olympia then decided to heal up with a Hyper Potion, but the battle was already decided due to the paralysis from Graham. It allowed me to switch into Steven, who would now outspeed the Slowking. I used Steamroller, which did huge damage. She Hyper Potioned again but fell to 2 more Steamrollers, and with that the 7th gym badge was mine. After beating Olympia, we got a hologram from Team Flare's boss saying their ultimate weapon was ready. I headed back to Lemoyne City where I found their secret base in a cafe. There we had to take on Team Flare's boss, Lysandra. He led with Mainfu, who used Sword Dance to raise his attack. Goop delivered a nearly fatal Shadow Punch before taking an Acrobatics, leaving him with rather low health, but one more Shadow Punch was enough to take Mainfu down. I switched into Colin to take on the Murkrow, and he finished the job with 2 Flame Bursts. Lysandra then brought out his ace Gyarados, who was a little bit more tricky. I switched into Graham, who licked him into Paralysis. Then used Surf for a bit more damage. Gyarados used Outrage, which was his last mistake, as I swapped into Lazza and used me first, allowing Lazza to use the Outrage against Gyarados, doing huge damage. Gyarados' Outrage had ended, which left him confused. I used Aura Sphere, and then Gyarados hurt itself in its confusion to knock itself out. Lastly was Pyroar, who took 1 Aura Sphere from Lazza and said, "Nope, I'm out," giving us the victory against Lysandra. I then worked my way through Team Flare's base, encountering another Alpha protecting 2 buttons, and he then threw a Sulk when he lost, and I pressed the red button, which released the ultimate weapon. Sorry about that. But for some reason, to stop it I had to fight Lysandra again. However, the outcome was exactly the same as the fight we'd had 2 minutes prior, because it was 2 minutes prior. I then went into the basement where I was ready to save the Pokemon, powering up the ultimate weapon. Oh wait, no, 5 more grunts have appeared, and more dramatics. Okay, now I was ready to release the ultimate weapon. Arguably one of the coolest looking legendaries came out of the weapon, and I'd love to add drama to this, but I used a Master Ball and named him Yami. Whilst capturing Yami, Lysandra has been busy getting a Mega Bracelet and a weird backpack for some reason, all in the space of 2 minutes, but we fought him again, but this time it was a little bit different. Mainfu got destroyed by Yami's Oblivion Wing. Then Pyro came out and he got destroyed by Graham's Surf. Two smackdowns from Graham were enough to kill the Honchkrow. But it now left the main event, Lysandra's Mega Gyarados. Yami's Oblivion Wing did a bit of damage, but not as much as I'd hoped for, but Yami did manage to avoid the oncoming Aqua Tail. I switched into Graham hoping he would Aqua Tail again, which he did, and managed to use Graham to bait him in to yet another outrage. So Lazza took it on the chin and returned fire with me first. Lazza took the second outrage and sent one more back in order to give us the final victory over Team Flare and the biggest strop we have seen yet. A real crash out from Lysandra. All that was left now to go and get the 8th gym badge. I went to Snowbell City where I got told I had to go and retrieve the gym leader to fight. So I did, and it was time for the last gym battle. It was time to earn our last gym badge against leader Wulfric. This gym was very much the Colin show as he led with a Bombness Gnome, who got one tapped by a flamethrower. His Cryogonal put up a better fight, taking only half the damage from flamethrower and returning a decent ice beam before falling to the second flamethrower. Up next was Avalugg, who left a very heavy avalanche on Colin, leaving him with only 7 HP. I decided to risk a flamethrower and it paid off as Colin outsped and got the one-hit kill to defeat the final gym leader, giving me all 8 gym badges. I then continued through Victory Road where I encountered the very last trainer in Victory Road and a disaster struck. His Alakazam one-tapped Steven with a Psychic. RIP Steven. I went into the Elite Four swapping Steven for Tyrantrum and began by taking on the Blazing Chamber first, and Malva was our opponent. She began the battle with her Pyroar. One Surf from Graham was enough to send Pyroar packing, before facing Talonflame. Talonflame started with a Brave Bird which dealt huge damage to Graham, but luckily his Surf was enough to finish off the Talonflame in one. Torkoal did his best Pyroar impression by dying to one Surf. I then switched into Yami to face her ace Chandelure. I used Phantom Force, which avoided Chandelure's flamethrower and took over half of its HP. Chandelure used Confuse Ray, but Yami pulled through to get off the Phantom Force and to win us our first battle. Up next was the Ironworks chambers to face off against Winkstrom and his steel type Pokemon. He led with Klefki, and I used Colin to get off a flamethrower, which couldn't quite finish the job. Klefki used Dazzling Gleam, which did next to nothing. Winkstrom used a full restore on Klefki, but I saw it come in, so I used a Fire Spin to leave Klefki on half HP before using a flamethrower to finish it off. Up next, I switched into Lazar to face off against his Robopass, who took a super effective Aura Sphere straight to that big old nose of his, but Sturdy kept him alive. Lazar survived the Earth Power before Winkstrom used another full restore. This time I used an Aura Sphere twice to finish off Probopass. I switched into Colin to face off his Aegislash. Colin's flamethrower did just over half damage, and Colin took a heavy hit from Shadow Claw but survived it in order to deliver a second flamethrower and finish off Aegislash. Colin then easily destroyed Caesar with one flamethrower, defeating Winkstrom and allowing me to move on to the Dragon Mark chamber. Here it was time to face Drasna and of course her Dragon type Pokemon. I led with Lazar to face her Dragouge. A Dragon Pulse from Lazar left Dragouge with less than half HP before Lazar endured a Thunderbolt and a second Dragon Rage sealed the deal. I then changed into Graham, who had earlier taught Ice Beam for this battle, which was a brilliant idea because his Ice Beam tapped both Drasna's Noivern and Altorion. Last Pokemon Drasna had was a Drudgeon, the bane of my life on Pokemon TCG. Goop did some great damage with an Earthquake before being switched out by Drudgeon's Dragon Tail, which forced in Yami. So I went for a Phantom Force, which wasn't enough to seal the deal. Another Dragon Tail dragged in Tyrantrum before Drasna used a full restore. Tyrantrum, much to my surprise, outsped and used Dragon Claw, avoiding Drudgeon's attack and finishing this battle with another Dragon Claw, meaning we had beat 3 out of the 4 Elite Four members. Last but by no means least, I entered the Flood Chamber to face Seabold and his water type Pokemon. Yami faced off against his Pokemon Clawitzer. I tried an Oblivion Wing, but it didn't do as much damage as I'd have liked, but luckily, nor did Clawitzer's Water Pulse. I used another Oblivion Wing, hoping for a crit, but wasn't so lucky. Yami firmed the second Water Pulse before Seabold used his first full restore. This time I did get lucky enough to get a crit from Oblivion Wing, and with one more Water Pulse survived, Yami finished off Seabold's first Pokemon. Up next was Seabold's Barbarcle, so I switched into Lazar, who gave him one Aura Sphere, which was super effective and killed him in one. Up next was Gyarados, who wasn't the easiest fight. I led with Lazar hoping to bait an Outrage, but instead he used Dragon Dance, which wasn't a bad thing as it raises Gyarados' attack and speed. He used Dragon Dance again, boosting his attack stat further. I switched into Yami and used Foul Play, which switches the attack stats of Yami and Gyarados, allowing me to get the one-hit kill thanks to the boost from Dragon Dance. Up next was his Starmie, who led with a Dazzling Gleam, which did good damage. I came back with a Foul Play, which was super effective and nearly one-tapped again. Cyberbolt used his last full restore, allowing Yami to have a free hit on the Starmie. And it allowed him to get me an easy victory with the second Foul Play. With all 4 Elite Four members down, all that was left to go and take on the champion Diantha in the Radiant Chamber. I started with Yami to face off against Holucha. Holucha used Sword Dance before getting destroyed by Yami's Oblivion Ring. Up next was her Tyrantrum, who had to face off against the mighty Glaza, who got it done with one swift blow, and a super effective Aura Sphere was enough to do the job. I brought out Graham to fight her Gudra, who delivered a big hit with an Ice Beam, before taking a Focus Blast which nearly ended his life. However, I got too greedy and went for a second Ice Beam, which would incidentally cost Graham his life. I'm so sorry, Graham. I will never forget you. Laza came out and Diantha used a full restore, but Laza had come to avenge his dear froggy friend. He delivered Dragon Pulse, full of vengeance, which ended Gudra's existence. Up next was Diantha's Auroras, who too had to feel the wrath of Laza's vengeance, as he got one-tapped by an Aura Sphere. I brought out Yami to face Diantha's Gorgeist. I led with a Phantom Force, allowing me to avoid her first attack and do some decent damage. I attempted it again but got outmaneuvered by my own plan. She too used Phantom Force, but luckily it didn't deal too much damage, and it allowed me to use a Foul Play and finish off the job, leaving just Diantha's Mega Gardevoir between me and finishing this Nuzlocke. Yami stayed out to use a Phantom Force again, avoiding the Gardevoir's oncoming Moonblast, and one-hitting the champion's ace, making me the new champion, and I can officially say my name has been PokeJG, and this has been me completing my first ever Nuzlocke. Thank you anyone and everyone for watching. If you enjoyed, please sub to the channel, as it is a brand new channel, and if you enjoyed Pokemon content, well, hopefully I'll be seeing you very soon. Peace.